Welcome back. All right, it's time to get this started. So I wanted to wait until we had a day where there was less than 4 NHL games, and I want to talk about the San Jose Sharks today as I start to look at teams that missed the playoffs. And so I start at the bottom of the standings and work my way up to the team that just barely missed the playoffs. So starting with San Jose, it's kind of an ugly picture, but we know they're in a rebuild. So that's something to keep in mind. The expectations coming into this season was that they would be the worst team in the league, and they were. 1954-9 record. Their points percentage of 287. The worst they've had since 95-96 when they also recorded a 287 points percentage. So the Sharks have been here before. The difference being in 95-96, they were still a pretty new team. They had gone through the expansion draft, and then their second year was an absolute disaster. 95-96 wasn't as bad as their really disastrous season. So this one feels bad because they've dove into it kind of thing. And again, they fought this rebuild for as long as they could, and now they're in it. Their draft lottery odds, they have a 25.5% chance of drafting first. They have the best odds of drafting first, an 18.8% chance of drafting second, and a 55.7% chance of drafting third. They cannot draft lower than third. And in this draft, even though it's not considered to be as star-studded as the 2023 draft, drafting third should still net you a pretty darn good player. So for the San Jose Sharks, they're going to add to their prospect pool. Their coach should still be David Quinn next season, I would think. I don't believe that there's a need necessarily to change coaches. I know when I've talked to Ted Ramey, I know when I've talked to Brody Brazil, anytime coaching questions come up, my answer has been basically the same. David Quinn hasn't really had a team on the ice that's going to get wins no matter who's behind the bench. You could take a Scotty Bowman in his prime, and I don't know that you get more than 19 wins. You might get, maybe 20. Maybe you get an extra win with Scotty Bowman. The GM, Mike Grier, a lot of people don't necessarily support a lot of the decisions made by Grier. I get it. I defended his trading of Hurdle at the deadline. I still believe that was a solid move on his behalf. I understand that people are mad about the retention slots being all used up for next year and for trading Hurdle in general and giving up a draft pick and all this. But I get what he's doing. He was creating a lot of cap space for the future and getting rid of a contract that likely wasn't going to get better as it aged. So in goals for this year, they were 31st. That kind of surprises me only because the way that they started the season, I'm surprised they scored more goals than anybody in the National Hockey League. And they were 32nd in goals allowed. So the San Jose Sharks had a really rough year. The second half of the season, though, there was definitely some signs that this team was getting better. Again, they had that really, really bad start to the season, which we'll talk about in a moment, which I think sunk any hopes they had. And, of course, at one point this year, their goals for per game was 1. They were scoring a goal per game. I think that was through their first 9 or 10 games. Their playoff drought is now at 5 seasons. So it has been a while, but it does feel like with 32 teams in the NHL and 16 making the playoffs, we're going to see teams going through longer droughts, longer time in between playoff appearances. So while there's a lot of laughing and mockery when it comes to the Buffalo Sabres, they might be just a pioneer of something new, which is a long time in between playoff appearances. This is why I'm not a huge fan of just tearing the whole thing down, because in this day and age, it can be really tough to build it back up. Their start to the season sunk them. 0-10-1 was the start. That is definitely the notable start to the season to discuss. I don't know that that'll be the notable of every team that I cover here. For instance, Anaheim will be pretty early in the playlist. Anaheim had a pretty good start, and then it fell apart for them. San Jose did not have that good start, but I'll say this. Granlund's career's been resurrected. He led them in scoring 69 games, 12 goals, 48 assists, 60 points. And it's insane that the top 3 scorers are that Lund line. So you've got Eklund second in the list, 80 games, 16 goals, 29 assists, 45 points. Eklund got better as the season went along. I would expect that he's going to put up, I would say 65 points next year is a realistic goal. Maybe 70. He's got some real talent. Zetterlund, 82 games, 24 goals, 20 assists, 44 points. I think considering the Timo Meier deal and what everybody thought of it at the time, they thought it had a certain odor to it. I think Zetterlund's been really, really good for them. And again, as the team gets better, we could see these numbers get better for these players. But it's nice to see Granlund have that bounce back. I don't know that he would have had it anywhere else. I think with San Jose, The reality is they didn't have a lot of offensively gifted players. Granlund got a lot more ice time and a lot more opportunity than he would have got anywhere else. And then you've got Bordelot. 27 games, 6 goals, 5 assists, 11 points. So I'm not just going through all of their top scorers. I know I've done that in seasons past. But I wanted to talk about Bordelot. He's had some really good moments. He's had some moments where he hasn't looked great. So it'll be interesting to see if Bordelot's part of their regular roster next year, or if he ends up being a call-up or maybe a 13th forward. Graf, after they signed him, and there were a lot of teams in on Graf, I think he'll get every opportunity to succeed next year. He had 2 assists in 7 games for them. And then one of the big question marks is Logan Couture. He wants to stay in San Jose. He doesn't want to go anywhere. He only played 6 games this year and just had the 1 assist. So the question with Couture is, this is a guy who has sacrificed his body year after year after year. And some of those playoff battles, I still remember him wearing that cage. Didn't he have his jaw wired shut? And when you're willing to play like that and you're willing to sacrifice the body, eventually the body fights back and says, yeah, you need some time off. And so with Couture only playing 6 games this year and being in his mid-30s, I do have a question about what Logan Couture is going to look like next season. And if he gets off to a really rough start, or if he's still struggling with injury, what do you do if you're Logan Couture, and what do you do if you're the San Jose Sharks? I think obviously with the amount of time Couture's been there, it would be natural for him to, once his career is done, to move into a management role with the San Jose Sharks. He's always seemed like, first off, a very hard-fighting player, great teammate, and he's always seemed like he thinks the game very well. So it makes a lot of sense that he would end up in a management role at some point with San Jose. Now, the starting question, Blackwood very likely to be the starter next year. He had a record of 10, 25, and 4 and an .899 save percentage. He was heroic some nights. There were some nights where he kept San Jose in the game. So the .899 save percentage is below league average, but I still think Blackwood had a really good year for them. And he needed that coming out of New Jersey. I think that he needed the change of scenery, and I think it definitely benefited him. So when we look at their pending unrestricted free agents, it's an interesting list. You have LeBanc. LeBanc not moved at the deadline. There wasn't much market for him, I guess. Same with Hoffman. Hoffman's headed to market. What does the market look like for Mike Hoffman right now? Is there going to be a team that gives him a 1-year deal? How many guys are going to end up being on tryouts for in September, right? And could Hoffman be one of them? Barabanov, last year he was fantastic. This year, quite the setback. I would not be surprised to see Barabanov end up staying in San Jose, though, because I don't know that he's going to get a better opportunity elsewhere, and it's not going to be an expensive contract, so I don't see any reason why San Jose wouldn't at least think about it. Bailey had a good run after joining them. Offensively, you're not going to get a lot out of Bailey, but you're going to get a lot of hard work. Again, that's a cheap player to re-sign if they decide to do so. Carpenter, very similar storyline there. McDonald, good blue liner. Has played forward at times as well. Again, not an expensive contract. Then there's Devin Cooley, whose rights they just acquired, and he's an unrestricted free agent. So do you keep Cooley? With what we saw of him after the trade to San Jose, do you look at him and say he could be one of the top 2 guys, or do you decide that there might be something better on the market? And then there's Lindblom. Oscar Lindblom, of course, from the Philadelphia Flyers, now with the San Jose Sharks. He finished the season on the injured reserve. We'll see if Lindblom's playing next year, what happens there. But at any rate, he's a pending unrestricted free agent. I don't see him returning to San Jose. And then you got the restricted free agents. So one good thing if you're San Jose and you're looking at your restricted free agent list is, since these guys didn't produce a lot of points, you're not looking at anybody who's going to get a huge contract extension. Luke Cunnin would qualify. Cunnin, hardworking forward, not a ton of offense there. And so if they decide to bring him back, and again, there's the qualifying offers you have to get through, but if they do decide to bring him back, I don't think that's going to be an expensive deal. Zadina, I felt for Zadina this year. Zadina ended up with, I believe it was 13 goals, which isn't bad. It's not bad. I mean, I understand that he may never live up to the billing of a first-round draft pick, but with 13 goals, there's the possibility that if San Jose decides to bring him back, he could end up being a 20-goal scorer next season. That's a possibility. There's also the possibility he would go elsewhere, so we'll see what they do there. Studnicka, who was picked up from Vancouver, he's an extra forward, not expensive. Kalen Addison. Addison, when he joined the San Jose Sharks, the offense was pretty strong with him. The defense is always going to be an issue. Obviously, Minnesota did everything they could to make Kalen Addison's defensive side of his game a little better. He sat out. They talked to him. They worked with him. But eventually they moved him. And Addison's numbers towards the end of the season with San Jose, not great either. So I don't know what the future is for Kalen Addison, but his stock has dropped a lot over the last 18 months. Ty Emberson was a good pickup for them on the waiver wire. I think that if they decide to qualify Emberson and keep him around, he's a solid top 6 option for them. The thing is, cap space, they got a lot of cap space. $38,170,833. Yeah. So this is why I say, like, San Jose could be in the mix for a couple of free agents. And I'm not talking about Sam Reinhart. I'm not talking about, like, the really big names. But maybe a couple of forwards at $4 million a year. Think like what Chicago did with bringing in Foligno, bringing in... They brought in Taylor Hall's contract. They brought in Corey Perry. We know that didn't work out well with the Corey Perry thing. However, that kind of veteran forward, they might be able to entice to come to San Jose in exchange for giving them a little bit more money. Saying, you know what, we're not going to be competing for a Stanley Cup. Here's a little bit of extra money to entice you to come in. So we'll see what they do with that $38 million in cap space. And of course, they can also park a bad contract. So this summer, even though the salary cap's going up by as much as $4 million, $4.5 million, there are still going to be teams that are pretty strapped when it comes to the salary cap. Vegas might be strapped with the salary cap next season based on moves and based on taking the Hurdle contract. And maybe San Jose takes a contract back from the Vegas Golden Knights once the playoffs are all said and done. And then they maybe get another draft pick in order to take on that contract, right? So a lot of money there for San Jose. It'll be interesting to see how they spend it. Draft picks, they have their own, of course. They also have Pittsburgh's. However, if Pittsburgh wins the draft lottery, that draft pick slides to next season because it is top 10 protected. Right now, Pittsburgh's pick is number 14. In the second round, they have their own, and they have the Devils. That Devils draft pick, a little bit higher than might have been expected at the time the trade was made. They have Tampa Bay's third-round pick, Vegas's fourth-round pick, Chicago and Pittsburgh's fifth-round picks. They do not have a pick in the 6th round, and they have their own pick in the 7th round. So we'll see how it all turns out for them, but, I mean, there's a couple extra picks here, but there's still time for them to add draft picks before the draft gets here. Again, keeping an eye on how much cap space they have and how some other teams might want to get rid of a contract or two. Their top prospects, I limited it to 4 here. Obviously, Will Smith's the one that's going to generate a lot of interest if he hits as well as he could. And I don't mean like physical hitting and everything, but I mean if he hits all the boxes that are expected of him with his output, this could be fantastic. Quentin Musty had a good season, so he has a chance at playing for this team sooner rather than later. David Edstrom was picked up from the Vegas Golden Knights. He was a first-round pick for Vegas. He's not seen as being like an absolute cream of the crop prospect, but he's seen as being a pretty good, say, B-plus level prospect. So again, I think that's a good pickup, especially if you're getting rid of Hurdle's contract. And then there's Philip Bystad. And Bystad, first-round draft pick, I believe 2022 for them. So we'll see which one of those players ends up playing for them next season. But with the amount of cap space they have, this roster could look completely different come October. If Mike Grier decides, you know what, we're going to try to speed up this rebuild process, he might be able to do that with the right moves. So while San Jose had a miserable season this year on the ice, I think off the ice, I think they made some smart decisions. Definitely some risky decisions as well. But we'll see how everything goes. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. So like ballpark, how many wins you think they get next year? I'll say 25. I'll say they go up to 25, maybe 30 wins next year with the right moves. But let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.